Good morning and welcome to day 3 of the World Economic Forum here in Davos. Very happy to focus on this session on urban transformation. And I've got a wonderful panel with me. We've got the Group Chief Executive Officer of the RIA Company, Jerry Inzerillo. We've got Aparna Bawa from Zoom, the COO, Chief Operating Officer, and of course from Nesma and Partners, Managing Director Rami Al-Turki. Thank you very much for joining me, all three of you. When we look at cities, it's quite fitting that we're here in a Swiss village where you get this sense of urbanization, where thousands of people descend on this small location, and you see the strain it puts on resources in a sense. If you look at 2050, the expectation is nearly 10 billion people, 9.8 billion people around the world. The population will reach 70% of those, nearly 7 in 10 of us, will be living in cities. What that means for life, for economies, for countries, societies as well, it's going to be reshaped. Jerry, I want to start with you then. When we look at urban areas, you speak fondly of your time as a busboy in New York, where you started your career. Given your 50 years in hospitality over the decades, what makes a good urban area? What makes a good city? What's key to have?
Well, thank you, and thank you, everybody. Good to be with everyone today, every single moment with humanity. You can consciously or subconsciously register what's meaningful to you, engagement. Just as a little side note, the greatest proof of that is all of a sudden the world wakes up to COVID without knowing how long it would be and how devastating it would be. So caution comes, and basically people are locked up for 2 years. What was the first thing they did when they realized that the threat might have been over? They went and traveled all over. For what purpose? The purpose was to interact. They missed human interaction. Now, you can be sophisticated and understand what that means in terms of the quality of life. Certainly, that's a big agenda item for His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, quality of life. You could just be a regular, normal person that doesn't focus on it every day, but just has the need for human touch, connection, affection, joyfulness, festivity, laughter. So the one great thing, which my friend, the musician Sting, always says, is that we may not share the same ideology, but we share the same biology. It's the same materials that makes musical instruments, especially organic musical instruments, drumming, for instance, or string instruments. But yet you go to different countries, those same materials produce different sounds. Those sounds produce different ways of dancing. The different ways of dancing produce different ways of costuming. The different organic materials in countries mean that your mothers cook with love, but they cook differently because they have different things in front of them. This is all to be celebrated. So what cities do is, one way or another, they force human interaction. And when that happens, it's magical. And just to finish that segment, if you look at central plazas or central parks, you look at New York, a very urban, tight, dense city. But yet there's a central park where people can come meet, right? The sun comes out in London, in 5 seconds, Hyde Park is full, right? Because people are looking for the interaction. Now, conversely, when you have an explosion of population and you cut into quality of life, right? Then you have to address how do you make the human condition survive climate and mobility issues and things like that. That's why His Royal Highness, one of his big agenda items is quality of life, and why he had the courage to say, am I tied to cities the way they've evolved over the last 200 years? Can I extract what's best about them and improve what's not well, which is a lot of the reasoning on the lab called NEOM, right? What will quality of life be 2040, 2050?
And that's a really important point I wanted to touch upon, because Aparna, traditionally we think of cities and you think the Industrial Revolution, the last 2-3 centuries, perhaps longer, people move where there are jobs. But the cities of the future, urban spaces of the future may look different. Where does technology come into that?
So I don't know that I can compete with the charisma of Jerry. Okay, so I'm just going to say that right off the bat. But his point is very well taken by me. I grew up in the Midwest in the United States, and I also live right now in California. And in California, you cannot get out. You cannot get by without a car. And I compare that to going to New York, where you walk on the street and there is a raw energy, and it's a very authentic, genuine energy. You might get hit if you're too slow and stop in the middle of pattern of walking. But there's an energy, there's a utility, there's an efficiency. And I contrast that. My husband's Canadian, and he often tells me in Canada the idea is different. We try to get as many people in sort of the same dense housing. First of all, it's very cold, so you have to get as many people together to stay warm. But it's also much more efficient for society. And I take that to heart. I will say, though, you can hit some of the quality of life issues very quickly if you have a lot of people in a condensed space. And I think technology has a great, even when we come to Davos, the hotels are packed, the restaurants are packed. With people, but we don't want the irritations that come with it. So I would say even things like traffic management, for example, AI can be used in assessing traffic patterns. It can be used by authorities locally or sort of in one area to see areas that they're not necessarily in proximity to. I will tell you, and Saudi is in fact leading the way in some of these use cases. Aramco, I was in one of their control center units, and I saw how they use our product to actually measure and assess rigs that are far away from the mum. So those are the use cases that are that can be achieved. They're getting achieved today. And I think even things like when your citizens I owe the U.S. IRS a call. They've overcharged my mother-in-law by $60, and I'd rather just pay the $60 than get on the phone and say that her tax return is correct, because the pain of doing that is tremendous. But what if you can enable even your government agencies to have AI-enabled contact centers, to treat it as if it's a capitalistic company venture, and actually provide services to all of those people in those tight units. You improve the quality of life, you reduce some of that friction, and you enable those to get that togetherness that Jerry was talking about.
And just briefly, those conversations around incorporating AI into the way we design cities, you speak to lots of mayors or from Zoom's perspective, urban planners. Are they already thinking about that in their design stage, or are we still a way off?
Absolutely. I think it's, I hate to say it, some of the fires in LA, I don't want to bring up a negative point, but some of the markers and the data to map out which areas are particularly susceptible. I know they are doing this in California today. I think we have to embrace that technology and take advantage of it really quickly as we have climate change, et cetera. The other thing I was going to say is, even during COVID, you had to run government. So we see all across the world governments continuing to use this online platform to reach their citizens, to convey their messages in a very effective way. So I think these sorts of things really help advance the cause of society and are here to stay, and hopefully will become even better.
Rami, when people look at the urban development space around the world, there are a few markets as hot as Saudi Arabia is right now. For those of us, we're in Saudi House, of course, who don't really have the insight, who are perhaps watching online. Just give us a sense of what's happening in the kingdom and why it's transformational in terms of urban development.
It's very exciting. You have here, one of the most exciting CEOs in Saudi, and leading one of the most exciting and attractive and engaging urban developments, actually changing the face of urban development in Saudi Arabia. And as a contractor, somebody who's executing, it's incredibly exciting. We're executing some of the most challenging, unique designs ever imagined. From Neom, Jerry talked about Neom, the line, Trojena, the mountain resort where we're going to have the 2029 Asian Winter Games, skiing in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
We're actually building the largest mall in the world right now in Riyadh. It's 1.5 million square meters built up. And so many other projects. I mean, we have an incredible, exciting program with the Expo 2030 that's just beginning now to discuss execution, and sustainability is a very big part of that. I mean, we're going to be the first expo that's carbon negative. So His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, committed to a carbon negative expo, which has never been done before. And of course,
It's because it's been carbon neutral so far and
exactly
net zero, but this is
so these are the
going
kind of
the other
challenges
direction.
that we're facing, and it's a digital age, of course. So everything from conceptual design to engineering to execution to maintenance and sustainability impact. All of that is being done in digital models. There's building information modeling, and it's collaborative. It has to be collaborative between the developer, the designer, and the execution companies, right? So overall, it's just an incredible time. It's exciting, and talking about how digital is combining and collaborating throughout the whole process is really exciting. And I think we're leading the way in Saudi on a global scale. And it's a great opportunity for collaboration with companies from all around the world to come and partner, as we are today as a Saudi company partnering with international companies to deliver these incredible projects.
It's very exciting, and I'm fortunate enough to travel regularly to Saudi Arabia and see this firsthand.
Saudi forefathers, the mud masons, they knew what time of year to make. No, I don't want machine made, because I don't want Diriyah, our home, the home of Al Saud, the birthplace of the kingdom, the source of Saudi identity and Saudi pride, to become a theme park like Las Vegas. I don't want to have the pyramids in Las Vegas to be a replica, right? Diriyah is authentic. Diriyah is Diriyah. So that said something. Now, it put a challenge on us, because when the forefathers made Diriyah, they may have needed 100,000 bricks. Well, how are you going to make 20 million bricks? Where's the mud? Where's the atto? Where's the tamarind wood? So we had to source it. Supply chain. We had to wipe out all the supply chain, because it's real organic material. It's not synthetic material. But everything we do now with Smart City, and I'll be very brief about this, he wanted Diriyah to be walkable. When we went to him in the original drawings of urban transformation, Your Royal Highness, do you see this as a kinetic, vibrant Cairo? Do you see it as a Rome? Do you see it linear, like a New York, defined by avenues and streets? Or do you see it where you want people to meander, and instead of having Disney-esque theme-oriented signage, you could look at the minarets of the mosque and say, oh, I know I have to go left and right. He wanted it more like a Marrakesh or Florence. But in order to do that, we had to put the whole infrastructure on the ground, the whole smart city, 60,000 parking spots on the ground, kilometers of loops for tour buses and Ubers and deliveries and all that. Well, we had a core drilled through 10 million cubic meters of rock. Rami could tell you. We had to take out 700,000 trucks of rock. So the thing there is that when you're up in Diriyah 1, in historic Diriyah, it will feel very organic and natural, but you'll have all the smart city technology below on the most efficient that's his commitment to sustainability and quality of life, where you can come 20, 30 years from now to where the kingdom was born 300 years ago, feel it, but then you have all the smart city technology that allows sustainability.
You've teed up the next thing I wanted to talk about perfectly, but I will come back to you on cultural preservation, because although you have all of the modern amenities in a place like Doria, it does feel and look very much as though you're stepping back in time, which I'll come back to you on. But the idea of smart cities, connected, everything connected, surely there must be security concerns around that if we're looking at connecting not just vehicles but entire cities. How do we mitigate the risks and use the benefits, Aparna?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think there are definitely, anytime you introduce new technology, I think even if you don't introduce new technology of physical security issues, you take it to technology, it takes it to a threat vector that's a little bit different. And I would say, I think it starts with how you design that technology, constantly being aware of security by design. In many jurisdictions, privacy by design is also very important, and making sure that data flows are what you intend them to be. Also, educating your population to say that, if you're, for example, in the United States, it's become very common that you get people asking for all sorts of stuff on your cell phone, pretending I must get a fake Amazon ping every day. And if you have to get smart, and educating our consumers on how to get smart and how to engage with these technologies. I also think from a regulatory perspective, making sure that regulation does not stymie development of technology, but also is intended to provide a level playing field, make sure that all these companies are operating with those secure by design principles. And always staying on the lookout. The threats keep getting better. You, as the white hat, have to keep getting better as well, and staying paranoid, to be honest. I was at a security breakfast, cybersecurity breakfast yesterday, and we were commenting how the CISOs in the room, when asked the question, how do you feel comfortable about your supply chain? How comfortable do you feel about your supply chain risk? I'm never going to be above a 5. Okay, never going to be above a 5 out of 10, and 5 is kind of bullish. But we were surprised that people were so confident. There has to be a level of paranoia and a level of investment focus on this area. And I think it goes hand in hand with some of the development.
Yeah, and it is an issue that the World Economic Forum has highlighted time and again in terms of cybersecurity and why it ought to be higher up on the global agenda. Rami, Jerry touched on another point there where he said, trying to build this, if you're looking at 10 million cubic meters of rock that you want to drill into, or 20 million mud bricks, supply chains and ensuring the viability of those is really important. In a market like Saudi, you touched on earlier the scale of things. How concerned are you about supply chains moving forward, particularly as the kingdom moves towards achieving Vision 2030?
Well, definitely. Look, the scale, as we said, is incredible. And it is a challenge. I mean, Jerry talked about something, maybe a small part of it, but very unique and has its own unique challenges, and something that has to be localized. I mean, you're not going to be able to do that in another country and ship it, right? But that's where the importance of partnerships come into place. So, and today, Saudi is open. More open than ever before, more open than many countries actually in the region. As a businessman, I can tell you, doing business in Saudi, not just because I'm Saudi, is a lot easier than most countries, even around in Europe. I think that's the best kept secret we have, unfortunately. But being here and the Saudi presence here is trying to explain that it is really a great place to work, to invest, and to grow. And back to the issue about partnerships, we cannot deliver this without global partnerships in design, in supply chain, in technology, in execution, and even with that, the global supply chain is challenged. Another aspect is not just the supply chain, but the people, talent, and you look at some of the top priority issues of Davos this year, talent is one of them, right? And in Saudi, we sit there thinking, oh my God, we have this talent issue. And then I hear it from a Chinese contractor that they're having challenges with talent, or an Indian contractor that's having challenges with talent. So it's a global issue, and those are India is the main market where we go for to bring in talent to Saudi. So what does that mean? That means we have to invest more locally. We have to use this opportunity, this incredible boom that we're in, to invest in localizing the supply chain in partnership with global companies, and also investing more and more in talent to be able to have the capacity to execute.
It's a really important point, because when we talk about supply chains and resources, people tend to think about the physical resources or goods, but the human aspect is just as important. Jerry, I wanted to come to you because if you think of cities, the great cities of the world, in recent decades it's been about urbanization, concrete, lots of buildings going up. Why is it important to preserve culture, do you think, when we're thinking about urban development and urban spaces for people in the future?
Yeah, I think it's reasonably simple in its concept. Difficult when you just have overcapacity, right? So the one thing that is beautiful about life is to be optimistic and to be joyful and to be festive. Because in this world, you're always going to have things that are going to trouble you. So how do you relieve your troubles and your responsibilities of raising families and running businesses? Well, you socially interact. You have people over to your home for dinner, and you sing and you dance, and this is a beautiful thing. So in a globalization, it was fun 30 years ago when you traveled and went to a city and you went into a shop for a woman that made hats, but her grandmother made the hats, her mother made the hats, and she made the hats. And you came home feeling, well, that was kind of fun to be in Greece to see that. And you went to Italy, and you went to Damascus, and someone made you the sandals right in the Medina. And, now you travel around the world, and every street has the same Prada, the same Gucci. Now, they're fabulous businesses, but in the homogenization of the human experience, you're stripping out the things that are the most interesting about what creates joy and festivity, what creates sharing. I'm going to try to see if I can get this out in 1 minute, but it's very, very important. If you look at the history of food and beverage, the classical history of food and beverage, especially aristocracy, the last meal on the table was a salad, a rough salad, usually with olive oil and balsamic vinegar, because it promoted digestion. The last thing any nutritionist would tell you, any scientist, any doctor would tell you, the last thing you want to do at the end of a meal is eat something sweet. So what was the creation of dessert, right? So the Medicis were great entertainers, but you had to come, it took you days to take your servants and your horses and everything to come and have dinner with the king and queen. So to honor your family, they went to the carpenters of the village, pewtersmiths, silversmiths, goldsmiths, depending upon your status, and they made everybody at the table a box. And in the box were candies, stewed prunes and cinnamon-flavored tomatoes. And they took silk and wrapped the confections in silk. That's why candy wrappers to this day that came. But what was Catherine Medici's goal? Thank you for coming to be with us. This is sweet remembrances of your visit with us. They were meant to be used for when you go home. You know what happened? It was a long day. When you had dinner with the king and queen, you were there 5, 6, 7 hours. When the king and queen left, everybody stood up. You wait till they left. You sat back down. What's the first thing you do? get the horses, get the carriages, let's go home. You were generally drunk, right? You saw somebody had a box. You know what you did? What's in your box? What's in my box? And you know what everybody did? They opened up the boxes at the dinner table that were meant for the ride home. And you said, well, I'll give you one of mine if you give me one of yours. That sharing is a human connection where it changed the whole direction of food and beverage, right? This is the beauty of humanity. Now, when you go to urbanization, where you have cities of 22 million people, look at Mexico City, what happened. Look at the modern cities of Guangzhou. Look at China, right? How do you get the compression of so many people where the urbanization doesn't create isolation? You know, Steve Jobs, before he died, one of his great, and Mark Zuckerberg said this even in front of Congress, when we came up with the name social media, when a few of us came up with the name social media, we never thought it would be unsocial media. It wasn't in our mindset. We created these platforms to share, not to criticize, not to be mean or destructive, right? So now, in the challenge in population growth is how do you preserve urban culture, national identity, source of pride, when you have to interpret it to 10, 20, 30 million people? And that's the challenge of leadership, I think.
And Aparna, when you think of a company like Zoom, Jerry just touched upon that, the importance of connection and interaction. Obviously, digital spaces is somewhere where more of those connections are being made. When you look at the thirst, if you like, for tech and digital online connectivity, there comes a energy cost with that as well. What can we do in terms of urban development and planning to ensure that the sustainability is at the forefront when we have these digitally connected cities and spaces of the future?
Absolutely. Although I will say I have to respond to Jerry, because the first thing that when you told this Catherine of Medici story, my team, we are known. We have this plan in Davos. It's our grandmaster plan to stop by the Saudi house after every meal to take a date. And that is the sweets in the sweet box wrapped beautifully. But that can be, I mean, it's become the highlight of, life, really, to enjoy with each other and have these grand plans. But back to energy efficiency. Yes, and I will say that I can tell you, Zoom, pre-pandemic, we used to talk about energy efficiency in terms of travel saved. In fact, one of our early markets were the financial services companies. And I can't tell you how many bankers would come and pitch to Zoom and tell us we saved over X million hours of travel, of time for our bankers, and they put it to good use. And this is the energy, the carbon captured by saving on the plane. I would say that's a simple answer. I think the technology itself has to be designed in a very efficient way. If you look at the architecture of Zoom, for example, we do less with every, I'm going to say, unit of server capacity, if you will. We do more with we use as little as possible to drive an insanely good video experience. That is by design, driven by this ever need for efficiency, really put out a quality product, but for efficiency. Our focus on AI, I mean, we offer our AI companion services across our platform at no additional cost for our paid customers. Largely, the way we're able to do that is because the design is so efficient. We're able to sort of lower the cost, even though this is powered by racks and racks of GPUs that are power hungry. So, even as we put our own co-located data center into the kingdom, that is, a principle that underlies everything we do. I would like to say that, it's definitely thought through from a sustainability perspective, but it's also thought through inherently from a design efficiency perspective. And I think more and more companies ought to do that. I will say at Zoom, one of the reasons I stay is because I hear over and over how we have enabled this human connection. And so while we talk about energy efficiency and making sure that our throughput is big, but our usage is small. That human connection and the necessity for it is what drives us.
And we hear a lot about AI at the moment. It's obviously a hot topic here, but just how much is that factoring into what Zoom is doing? If you think of video to video, where is AI going to take a company like Zoom in the future when it comes to connectivity?
You know, so our focus on AI is really around making human beings more productive. I mean, the human being for us is front and center as our opportunity. We're not in technology for technology's sake. It is the social part that we're also, and the benefits of people getting together in various formats and bringing people across the globe advances society in general. And so for us, that is a very key point. So we are focused on making human beings more productive, reducing mundane tasks, making you do the things that only you can do, not eliminating jobs, but creating more jobs that are, that drive against society forward. For example, everybody knows meetings. I mean, you probably don't know that our whole platform, we have very well integrated services, whether it's phone or a contact center, docs, etc. But everybody knows meetings. I mean, now you can go late to a meeting by 10 minutes, ask AI Companion to catch you up, not have to interrupt the flow of the meeting, not sound like a jerk because you're saying, hey, everybody else, stop what you're doing because I'm late. And you can enter and participate and feel confident and contribute to that meeting in a very quiet way, but in a very smart way as well. It's those kinds of things, making the human being more productive, more applicable to the situation. Those are the types of things that we're focused on.
Thank you, Aparna. Rami, when you look at what's coming up in the pipeline, some major global events, if you think of Riyadh Expo 2030, that's a matter of years away, and then the World Cup in 2034. When you're designing the infrastructure on a scale like that for these global events, essentially some of the most attended anywhere in the world, what's key to try and ensure that these spaces that are developed in urban areas are used long after those events take place?
Well, back to the point about sustainability also, and we're not really involved so much in the design, we're more on the execution, but we're partnering with, as I said earlier, the owner and the designer to deliver on these projects safely and on budget and on time. And with these projects, we don't have the luxury of time, right? We have a very clear deadline for Expo, World Cup, and so there has to be very strong collaboration and different contracting methods that we're seeing now and we're implementing, which are more collaborative, more partnership based. And again, it takes collaboration with players from all around the world. But I want to go back to what Jerry was talking about earlier, and I think it's culminated into vision statements by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, and there's one that I always carry with me, and I remembered now when you were speaking. If you don't mind, I'll just read it, because I think it's inspiring to me as a Saudi, but also a very clear message to the world about who we are and how we want to collaborate with. Of course, he said it in Arabic, but I took the liberty of translating it. So it's our vision for our country is that of a strong and prosperous state that is inclusive of everyone. And this is unique from a leader, I think, today that has such, as Jerry was saying, has such clear vision of what he wants, and so different from what we've seen in the past in Saudi Arabia. But very clear, its constitution is Islam. And back to what Jerry was talking about, you have to have the base of the culture and the heritage. And its approach is moderation, but embracing others. We will welcome talents from everywhere. Case in point. And everyone who comes to join us in building and achieving success will be treated with respect. So I think this is really, from the leader, a very clear message about what his expectations are, how we will grow, how we will execute locally, but in collaboration with everyone.
You guys are teeing up one another perfectly in terms of where I wanted to take this conversation. But Jerry, a key point there raised about partnership and international collaboration. This is a WEF accredited session we're taking part in at the moment. Geopolitics is another concern, a very uncertain world where we're heading. If you look at geopolitically, the region, but also elsewhere in the world, geoeconomically as well, there are major challenges still in developed and developing economies. How important is it for a country like Saudi Arabia, but generally, to be looking at not just the West, but the global South, and perhaps being a connector in all of that?
Yeah, I think there's pockets where one can look geopolitically, geoeconomically on things that could be discouraging. There's many problems to solve: climate change, inclusion, disparity of income levels. But there's more to be positive about. One is the young leadership that's emerging around the world now, men and women, and especially that in the Gulf. So one would say, I have to work and dedicate my life to make sure that my people are safe, they're healthy, they're educated, and they're entitled to self-esteem where the society can be positive and optimistic, and certainly where people feel that their families have bright futures. But I'm not going to be selfish about it, because whatever I learn to do that, once accomplishing my goals, let that be the model to my surrounding countries, and let that be the model around the world. Let everybody, vision to the high bar. I'm seeing that consistently, especially with the Gulf leadership, and certainly with His Royal Highness, which is very unselfish to say, we're going to take the vast resources of Saudi to try and improve quality of life, but we're not going to just ethnocentrically keep it ourselves. We want that to resonate throughout. Now, with the session before us, we have the great His Highness Prince Faisal, our foreign minister. You hear what he said? There's a lot of challenges within the United Nations and a lot of challenges within the World Bank and stuff like that. But we want peace and prosperity. Peace and prosperity will generate employment. Employment will generate income, will allow people to have time to celebrate and educate their families and stuff. So all these leaders know that you have peace and prosperity, but they also know that on 194 countries and 44 dependencies, you got 30, 40 countries that are massively wealthy, and then you have many that are not. So how do you spread that? And that's where foreign policy comes in, foreign aid comes in. That's where the World Bank comes in, the IMF comes in, right? And there's a lot of smart people. You see them in Davos, right? So I think there's a lot to be encouraged about, but what we have to do is we have to make sure we celebrate what's unique about ourselves. That's why global tourism is imperative. And with technology, what's the goal? Make it easier to travel. Will there come a day where you won't have hard passports? Will there come a day where safety and security can be assured by technology, where you can have biometrics and facial recognition, where you can go from one place to the other seamlessly? Because that will just improve human interaction, which will make just quality of life better. One of the problems in America right now is that if you ask most American families and young people under 30, do you believe your quality of life will be better than what your parents had? And you ask their parents, do you believe your children will have a better quality of life than what you have? Most in America now will say no to that. Whereas you take my father, who didn't even finish the 8th grade. He'll say, I'm going to work hard, and my kids are going to have a better life than I had. It's true of all of us, right? So that's what I think the modern leadership is coming around the world now, and I think that's something to be very encouraged about.
And that has traditionally the work ethic or moving to urban areas and cities has been driven by employment. But Aparna, when you look at the growth areas of the future, take a place like Africa, 54 different countries, they don't have the sort of legacy industrialization that we started off talking in this session about. Is that an opportunity for these emerging cities or urban spaces of the future to really leapfrog, use technology and emerge into cities that we haven't really imagined?
Absolutely. And, you don't have to, even within this United States, where Jerry's absolutely right, it can be dim for certain, in the response when you ask that question, will you be better off than your parents? And even in places like Africa, in India, I was on a panel yesterday with one of the Indian ministers, and, let's just take an example of India. You go into the most rural areas where the broadband is awful, okay? You can still use Zoom on your cell phone, get crystal clear video. You can say that's amazing for Zoom. I think that's now become table stakes, the expectation. And as technology advances, that is what we should expect. And if you look at society in India with the billions of people that they have, with wide variety of economic disparity, the lower is really low, the high is really high. It's amazing to me that we skipped an entire generation of people on laptops, and we went straight to the 3G mobile phone, which drives so much commerce in India. It's insane. So if we can use that as an example and for hope that equalizer, technology can be that equalizer. The other point, connecting the panels is something that it's lovely for me, actually. But, we are capitalistic. We're a company in the United States. We're definitely capitalistic. We make money. We put financials out for our shareholders to see. But at the same time, there has to be connection in advancing society just for the greater good of society. And I think finding that connection is the promise of the young person. I see it in my kids more than I see it in my own generation. At Davos, I feel very young. At home, I feel very old. And I feel like our kids see that connection in ways, and I think that is the promise.
We've got a few minutes left. Jerry, I just wanted to come to you for a final word, because this is an important issue in terms of people moving to greener pastures, if you like. Usually urbanization, urban development driven by the urbanization, urban development driven by the need for jobs. We have this bulge of people around the world now moving to urban spaces without the necessary jobs that are materializing. If you look at, again, parts of the developing world, what's key to ensuring that these spaces are safe, prosperous, even if those sorts of jobs don't materialize?
Yes. I'll just take 15 seconds because I know we're running out of time. Yesterday I was on a panel, and there was a young startup tech person, very articulate, and the way she asked me a question, I think it came out different than what she meant. But she said, in your generation, when did you become aware of AI?
That's hilarious.
So when I'm at Davos, I feel old, and when I'm at home, I feel old. So I have it a little different. So I had to answer her because it was a question. So I said, look, I want to let you know, my generation became aware of AI 30, 40 years ago. And she looked at me and said, there wasn't AI 30, 40. In my generation, it was. It wasn't called artificial intelligence. It was called absence of intelligence. That's what my generation learned on that. But here's the thing. Now, the private sector will always take a leadership role. And you see, you have to put out your shareholders. You have to take care of them. But there is CEOs that are looking at the greater good. But now it's imperative that the leaders, the G20 leaders, stop being so ethnocentric and say, what is the greater good of the planet? It's great to have a nationalistic approach. But like Prince Faisal said this morning, we all have got to be looking after the planet, looking after each other. It's going to be complicated. We're not going to agree on anything, as he said this morning. But I believe that that leadership is omnipresent now, men and women. You look at women in major leadership roles, not just in the CEO offices, but politically around the world. And I think you're seeing some immensely articulate, very intelligent leaders, humanistic leaders. So my view is looking forward over the next 10, 20 years, especially with the leadership in the Gulf, it's very positive.
Yeah, and City is very much expected to continue to be the lifebeat of economies and countries moving forward. Fascinating discussion. We've run out of time, but so much covered in that session, not just looking at the kingdom, but also the global implications and some of the challenges we've spoken about as well, and sustainability at the heart of what good urban design and development ought to be about. Thank you once again to all of my panelists here, Rami Al-Turki, the Managing Director of Nesma and Partners, Aparna Bava from Zoom, the COO, and of course the Group CEO of the RIA company, Jerry Inzerillo. Thank you very much.
Thank you.